That was a moment of total horror, is really the best way I can describe it. My immediate thought was, oh my God, my husband's in the building. He was there with someone else, and I knew that, and that was.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and my experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. This week, we're doing an analysis that's going to be a little bit lighter than some of the really heavy topics we've been looking at lately, which I think is a welcome break. And this is an interview that a ton of you sent me asking for an analysis. So this is Oprah's exclusive interview with Kristin Cabot. Now, Kristin is, of course, the HR executive who last year went to a Coldplay concert with her boss and the next day woke up and was the subject of one of the most viral videos the internet has ever seen. The camera at the concert caught an intimate moment that Kristin was sharing with her boss at the time, Andy Byron, and they got instantly awkward. They started to hide, turn away from the camera, to the point where Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, made a comment about it, and within days, pretty much everyone on this planet had seen that footage.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
In this exclusive interview with Oprah, Kristin opens up about their relationship, their respective marriages at the time, and some details about the event that not a lot of people knew. But some people noticed that there are certain things in her story that don't line up. So in this video, we're going to look at all of it. Her body language, her facial expressions, her word choice, and her narrative to see where the big question marks are in this whole story. And for regular viewers of the channel, make sure to stick around till the end of the video because I have an important announcement. And with that said, let's dive right in.
Andy and I had gone out to grab sandwiches during the workday, and he asked me, I seemed a little off, and he just said, what's going on? And I said, well, my husband and I are separating and planning a divorce. And he immediately let me know that he was in the exact same situation, that he and his wife were living apart. They were planning for a divorce, and it had been many years in the making. Over the next, few weeks to month, that was a place that was really great for me to be able to go to talk about what I was going through, and I was a good, safe space for him. And I think probably my friends...
Did you both talk about what it was like going through this separation?
And that was where we started to build a bit of a stronger connection. And I was really surprised when he told me. We didn't talk a lot about our personal lives prior to that, so I didn't expect to hear that from him.
Okay, so right off the bat, she's talking about sort of how it all started between the two of them well before the concert. And we get a really good baseline for the way she tells stories and some really great evidence that she has a script that she wants to stick to and things that are important for her to say during this interview. So one thing you'll notice with a lot of these clips is that her body language doesn't scream. Like a lot of people, their body language comes to life and you can see a lot of different things. With her, she's pretty muted. I would imagine she's pretty stressed throughout this interview, a lot of signs of that. But one of them is the fact that there isn't that much movement. She doesn't have these big illustrators. These are gestures that we make to illustrate what we're saying, and they're pretty universal. We see that there's quite a bit of movement with her head. She nods along like this sometimes. Every now and then she shakes the head like this when she's denying something, but it's not these big gestures with the head. And something that I pay a lot of attention to is the eyebrows, and she's not someone who talks with the eyebrows all the time like this, which is why in the little moments where we see those eyebrows pop, it really lets us know, okay, that there's something important in this moment, because that's what the research shows. There's a lot of research done on the importance of eyebrows in communication, and universally, everywhere in the world, when we see those eyebrows go up in a conversation, it denotes that something is important. So we might see this when we greet someone, we're giving them importance. They might go up to denote an important point that we're making, or with surprise. We see something surprising and the eyebrows go up to say, oh, look, there's something important here. So the eyebrows are like the exclamation point of the face, and she uses them very much synced with things that are important in the story. For example, for a while they didn't move there, but when she talked about how she seemed a little off, and he asked, what was wrong with her, in that moment, I seemed a little off, we see an eyebrow flash with this no gesture of the head. So that eyebrow flash is letting us know that's important. That's where it all started, because it seemed like something was off. He asked her what's wrong, and that's how this entire relationship began. Now, as she's saying that, you'll also notice a bit of a no gesture like this. Now, this is one of the biggest myths in body language. People think that the moment you see someone doing this while they're talking, it means they're being deceptive right away. First of all, there isn't a single gesture on this planet that can allow you to know immediately that someone's being deceptive. Least of all, this gesture. Because we could very often do this in points of emphasis as well. Like if something's really good, like we taste something that's so good and we can't believe how good it is, we might go, oh my God, this is so good. Like, it's unbelievable. I can't believe it. So we have to critically think about what else could be causing this inner conflict, because that suggests inner conflict, not just deception. Could be deception, but what else could it be? So in this case, she's searching for her words as she's telling the story. He asked me, I seemed a little off, and we see that no gesture. It's very commonly seen in that exact context where it represents, I don't know how else to say it, I seemed a little off. I don't know exactly what it was. Like, there's some missing information there. I don't know what it was. I seemed a little off. He noticed, and that's where everything started. We get a really interesting moment when Oprah asks, did you both talk about what you were going through with the marriages? And Kristin goes, we did. And we notice two things there. One, it's this confident, we did. The voice goes upwards.
Did you both talk about what it was like going through?
And the second thing we see is an upward nod like this. So this is a very confident way of nodding. It allows us to maintain eye contact, and it's very open. So when we're confident, comfortable, we tend to see people agree or talk like this. That's going to change a little bit later, and it's going to fluctuate. But in this moment, it's a pretty confident confirmation of that. So did you guys both talk about it? Yes, we did. Confident, clear, and the voice goes up. Immediately following that, she does something else that we're going to see her do a lot throughout this interview, and it's use ambiguous language that in an interrogation room or interview room, we would immediately catch on and say, can you give us more details on that? So in this case, she goes, we started to build a stronger connection. Okay, what does that mean? That's huge, because that's such an ambiguous range of things, and it can mean different things to different people. Do you mean a stronger emotional connection? Do you mean things start to get physical? What do you mean?
We started to build a bit of a stronger connection, and
So this is something you can really train yourself to listen for when you're trying to get the truth out of people, these kind of ambiguous terms that require a little bit more detail. Because what does stronger connection mean? I would love to know. Speaking of things that interrogators and interviewers are trained to listen for, one of the things we pay a lot of attention to is the timeline of a story. Usually if I'm recalling a story, I'm going to tell you the story in the order that it happened. If I remember something later, I might go, oh, you know what? I just remembered that this thing happened. But typically it just goes in the chronology that it happened. In her case, you'll notice at the end, something bizarre happens that kind of shifts the timeline. Because right at the end, we see her thinking again like this to the side, which is how she often thinks about what she's about to say. And she says, you know, I was surprised that he shared that with me, because up until then, he had never shared parts of his private life with her.
And I was really surprised when he told me. We didn't talk a lot about our personal lives prior to that, so I didn't expect to hear that from him.
But that doesn't belong at this point of the story. It belongs right at the beginning. I even cut some of the conversation out. It was longer than that, but essentially she starts by saying, you know, there was something off about her. He asked her what's up, and then she opened up, he opened up. That's where it would be normal to say, you know, I was surprised because he had never opened up to me like that before. But that didn't happen. She goes on to talk about how this developed over weeks and months, and Oprah asked the question and they built a stronger connection, all this other stuff. And then she goes, and I was surprised that he opened up because he had never shared anything private. So I think what's happening there is when she's looking to the side like this, she's not necessarily only recalling the story, but the things that she had told herself are important to say during this interview. So I think she has this kind of loose script that's important for her to convey all this information. And one of those things was that it was surprising to her because he had never opened up. That's why we see her thinking to the side and then throw this bit of information that would have belonged much earlier in the story. I think it's because she's trying to recall, okay, what were some of the things I wanted to say? Oh yeah, it was surprising. And we're gonna get a lot of evidence throughout this that there are these little important points that she wants to throw in that she remembers maybe a little bit out of timeline. All right, now we're gonna go to the actual night of the concert and what happened. And the story is about to get really juicy, but so are my questions about a lot of this. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and take a quick second to like this video because it really does help with the success of the channel.
Over Zoom, you said that was the first time you all had done anything publicly. That's the first time you'd actually shared any kind of
physical
touch.
Yeah, so what happened...
At the Coldplay concert, the first time it touched you?
Yes. I'll explain. I'm here.
Okay, so this is a moment we're gonna come back to a lot throughout this video where Oprah is saying that in their Zoom conversation, Kristin told her that this was the first time at the Coldplay concert that they did anything physical. And you'll notice that while Oprah is saying it, first we get a rather confident yeah from Kristin. But as she's nodding like this, there's a moment where she does this, like her head comes up and she does this, but because Oprah keeps talking, she just goes back on this yes train. And that is some kind of conflict there. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you, is it for sure deception? It's not for sure deception, but there's more to this story because otherwise it would just go, yeah, absolutely, 100%. but there's something there. Now, it's possible that that conflict is like she's about to say, yeah, we had never done anything else before that moment. I don't know what it is, but sometimes with interviews like this, when the interviewer keeps talking, we miss that opportunity to dig into that moment and let Kristin talk here and let her elaborate on that, which she will do in a moment. But in that moment, I would have loved to know what this, why this yes transformed into a no for a moment. What conflicting thought caused that? Because it's something. But you'll also notice that her agreement kind of loses a little bit in confidence. Whereas earlier we had this confident upwards, like yes, like with the voice going up as well. In this case, she's kind of nodding along like this. Her expression is pretty stiff as she's just kind of looking at her and just kind of nodding like this. It's a little more downwards, a little more closed in. So I'm not saying it's full-on deception, but this little no there, this kind of more muted yes, this more stiff expression, to me suggests that there's a little bit more to this here, a bit more nuance. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's, it was the first time they did something publicly, like some affection publicly. I don't know, but I would want more elaborations in that moment. What I find really funny is that at the end of that question, Oprah's expression on her face and the gentleman in the crowd, his expression on the face, that's literally all of us watching. Oprah has skepticism written all over her face because you see the eyebrows come down like this with this little bit of a head tilt. And head tilting is actually quite universal and usually symbolizes one of two things. It's either exchanges of sympathy, so either we're sympathetic towards someone or requesting sympathy, or it happens in curiosity or skepticism as the head tilts like this, and very often with that kind of scrunching of the face that we saw on Oprah.
Though we'd had a lot of personal conversations and had acknowledged that we had feelings for each other.
Okay.
Also, it was becoming apparent to me that we were putting ourselves in a situation where it was going to get risky from a work standpoint. I mean, I reported to him.
I always say that there's a whisper and then there's a pebble and a brick and a brick. Was there a little whisper saying we should tell somebody or we should?
It was more than a whisper.
Okay,
it was like a real conversation where we sat down and said, like, we have to figure out a plan for this because these feelings are real. This wasn't like a fleeting thing. And 5 or 6 days before the concert, we had a lunch that was a lengthy lunch to talk about this and to make a plan.
And the plan was to go to
the board and let them know that we had developed feelings for one another and that we wanted to change.
And that it was consensual.
It was consensual, and which is an important point, 100%.
Okay, I'm going to put aside the body language here for a second because I really want to focus on the story that she's telling, because I'm sure that a lot of you, like me, in this moment had a bit of a question mark about what she's saying, because the whole point that she's making here is that these feelings were real. That's what she's saying. These feelings were real, and that they sat down and had a lunch to talk about how they had to go and report this to the board and let them know that something's going on here. And this, by the way, this is all before the concert. That's very important. So all this happened before the concert, but she's saying that they never got physical before the concert. So you were going to go have a conversation with the board and you felt that things were getting real before anything got physical. Look, I suppose it's possible. I suppose it's possible that the emotional connection was so strong that for the first time, maybe in history, these two were like, no, you know what? Let's abstain. Let's not get physical at any point. Let's do the right thing. Let's go talk to the board and let them know that the feelings are real here. I don't know. I've worked with a lot of HR firms. I've consulted for a lot of HR firms. I've trained a lot of HR firms. And I know that typically you report something when there's something to report. You don't go report that I have a crush on my boss. If everybody who had a crush in the workplace had to go disclose that, it would be a disaster. Every HR department would be busy all day with crush reports. So for me, the question is, report what? You know, you're claiming that nothing happened physical. What was there to report? In order for me to be convinced that these two had a plan to go talk to the board before anything physical happened, just to report feelings that they had, you would have to convince me that these are two very respectful people who do everything by the book. However, in that short clip that we all saw, we know that they don't do everything by the book. We have visual evidence of that, and they're not the most respectful individuals either. And we're going to go into details as to why I say that is. So based on that discrepancy, either that conversation didn't really happen, or it wasn't that serious, they weren't really seriously contemplating it, or the relationship had progressed quite a bit more than just feelings if they did have that conversation and had something to report to the board.
And we'd been keeping it together. Like I could go to work and be normal. I can go to a concert and be normal until I couldn't, obviously. But
and that pretty much seals the deal for me on this whole what happened before the concert thing. Because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to put this into words, but I'll try and hopefully you guys will get what I mean here. She's saying, I could go to work and be normal. I could go to a concert and be normal until I couldn't, right? So think about what that implies. What she's saying is, she has the capacity to go to work and be normal around him. Okay, well, what's normal? What's abnormal? Because what she's implying there is that she could go to work and act normal so that nobody would know that something's going on, when in fact, if she were to act the way that she wanted to act, they would know, right? Just like at the concert. I could act normal until I couldn't, until, the jig was up. So there's clearly some kind of relationship that she had to act normal to hide.
And this was the first time
Socially.
you all had done something socially other than meeting for lunches and discussing business.
Or grabbing drinks after work with colleagues and things like that. Yeah.
So you get.
And there is another big moment here where pretty much any interviewer or interrogator who's trained to get the truth out of people would know in this moment that something's being hidden, just in the word choice and in the body language. So she says, so Oprah's asking her, this was the first time we did anything social together. And Kristin answers, drinks after work. And we see that no gesture, which is fine. And we'll get to in a second. But then she follows with colleagues and things like that. So, and things like that. And as she's saying that, we see a one-sided shoulder shrug. Only her left shoulder shrugs like this. In his best-selling book, What Everybody is Saying, former FBI agent and best-selling author Joe Navarro, who is a good friend of the channel and has been here before, talks about the difference in shrugging and how when there's an actual disconnect from something, an actual lack of knowledge, we tend to shrug really quickly like this with both shoulders, a quick pop, like I don't know. This is a subconscious gesture signaling a lack of knowledge or a lack of information or a lack of engagement. And the research backs this up as well. When we actually don't know something or don't care about something, it's just a quick pop like this with the shoulders, sometimes the hands, sometimes the eyebrows, and sometimes the mouth, like that. When we see it on just one shoulder, it's often an illustrator because illustrators, the gestures we make to illustrate what we're saying, are often asymmetric, whereas subconscious gestures are very often symmetric. So when we see that one shoulder pop, it often denotes a lack of confidence. Like I'm not so sure in what I'm saying, and I'm using that shoulder to really emphasize this point, like I don't know what's going on. I'm not really confident in this. Now, of course, like everything else, baseline is extremely important. I wouldn't want you to watch this video and say, oh yeah, I've got a friend who talks all the time like this with one shoulder. It doesn't mean he lacks confidence. That's true, but that's his baseline. Some people talk like this, illustrate all the time. Some people even talk with both shoulders. Kristin does not. She has numerous shrugs throughout this interview, and almost every single time, both shoulders go up, or sometimes it's a little bit of one, but the other one isn't dragging far behind. This was a very, very clear one-sided shoulder shrug at a time when we're seeing this no gesture and a very ambiguous line. Things like that. That is a very interesting choice of words because an interrogator would stop and go, and things like what? Like what else? Okay, so you had drinks with colleagues. What else? And you let the person talk. Tell me every single type of activity that you did. To be clear, this doesn't necessarily mean deception at all. These could all mean that it was other things along those same lines, right? Like this kind of no with the shrug and things like that could suggest, we had drinks with colleagues, we had lunch with board members, we had dinner with clients, and things along those lines. I'm just saying that ambiguity with that bit of a conflict and lack of confidence would make me want to know, okay, tell me specifically what else. Because it could also be naked sleepovers at the Marriott.
So she let me know that my estranged husband was also at the concert.
So you get texted from one of your children.
Yeah, my daughter was like, this is so fun, great. I was like, and in my mind I thought, well, is this going to be weird if he sees me with Andy? Like that crossed my mind.
Or you run into him.
Yeah, if I run into him. But then I was like, I'm in Gillette Stadium. There's 55,000 people here. I'm probably not going to run into him.
So that clip is really important for two reasons. One, it's giving us vital information here. Her estranged husband that she was separated from at the time was at the concert. And this is where she's telling us that. And two, we saw a bunch of shoulder shrugs there, all both sided. When she's just naturally talking about something that happened, there's no real reason to believe that she's being deceptive about any of that. And we're just seeing those shoulders naturally pop like this as she's talking. That is her baseline, which is why it stood out to me when that one-sided shoulder shrug happened in the previous clip.
That was a moment of total horror, is really the best way I can describe it. My immediate thought was, oh my God, my husband's in the building. He was there with someone else, and I knew that, and that was great and fine. But he and I were in the midst of our separation, incredibly amicable. Like to this day, he's been one of the biggest supporters of me through all of this. Yeah. He's an incredible man. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I wanted to do was embarrass him. And that was my first thought when I saw myself. That was what I thought was the biggest problem I had on my hands.
Why were you worried if you were already separated?
Because we were in the middle of going through our divorce planning, and it was going really, we were doing it in a really amicable way.
But he was there with somebody.
He was there with somebody, but Andrew comes from an incredibly private family in the Boston area, and I just knew in my head, like, the public embarrassment is not something that would have gone over well.
Okay, so your first thought was Andrew.
Okay, if you're new to this channel, I want you to know something. I am a huge advocate for nuance, and I stay away from absolutes at all costs. I don't believe in being very certain of something, and I like to consider all options. So what I'm about to say is something that I very rarely say this confidently. I don't believe her. And there are two reasons that I don't believe her. And let me be specific. I don't believe when she says that the first thought that entered her mind when she saw herself on that screen was her ex-husband. Let me tell you why, just based on this clip that we saw. First and foremost, she said right there that her ex-husband comes from a very private family from Boston, right? This concert was in Foxborough, Massachusetts. That's about a half-hour drive from Boston. So presumably, there might be a lot of his family members, his friends, his social circle at the concert. She doesn't know who's there. She knows he's there. She doesn't know who else is there. And she doesn't know where he is. So the moment she's behaving that way, it's not just a screen. She has no idea who could see her, who may have spotted her, who may have recognized her, who knows her ex-husband. If you were really that concerned about your ex-husband, if you really cared that much and you were that paranoid and it was the first thought in your head when you saw yourself on that screen, you would not behave that way in the first place, knowing that you're in an area at a concert, a public concert, where he might know people that are there and he himself is somewhere in the crowd, but you don't know where. But the second reason I'm not buying what she's selling here, and I'm gonna put my degrees to work here a little bit, is how she justified it. She said that the first thought that entered her mind was her ex-husband, and then she elaborates and says, due to social embarrassment. You know, they have a great connection, he's a great guy. She didn't want him to feel socially embarrassed. That is called cognitive empathy. That is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, feel how they would feel in that same situation and feel bad for them. And then another layer on top of that is that it's not just cognitive empathy, but it's cognitive empathy for social embarrassment. So not something primitive like being scared or being hurt, but social embarrassment. These are all upper cognitive functions. To cognitively know what somebody else would feel in a situation, specifically a social embarrassment situation, is not common to all mammals. A rat doesn't cognitively know how another rat would feel in a moment of social embarrassment. It doesn't exist for them. But we have upper cognitive functions. This is what makes us social beings. But this is not an instinct. It's a slow cognitive process. It takes thought. What we saw in that clip, what billions of people saw in that clip, that was instinct. That was survival instinct. That was self-preservation. It was instant. The moment they saw it, she went to shock and instantly turned away. I could promise you that in that moment, she was not thinking about her ex-husband. It was entirely self-preservation. Seriously, I don't care if you're new to body language or you've been studying it your entire life. I don't think anybody, just based on pure instinct, is looking at that clip at the concert and buying that, yep, that right there is somebody who's worried about their ex-husband's social embarrassment. That's what that expression is. I mean, let me know in the comments. Is there anyone who's actually buying that that was the first thought in her mind? Now, if she had said, you know, my first reaction was, oh my God, I can't believe we're up on the screen. I'm not supposed to be with this guy. This is going to be bad for us, for our families, for my job. If she said that and then said, but you know, afterwards, as things started to calm down, as I was in the car, I thought about my ex-husband. He was at the concert. I would believe that. I would believe that eventually she thought of him. But the first thing she thought of him, nah. And I'm not entirely sure that Oprah's buying this either, because she goes, well, he was there with someone else. And then as she continues, Oprah just goes, yeah. So the first thing you thought of was Andrew, and she just kind of moves along with it a little bit. So I'm not sure how much she's buying it.
And my second thought was, oh my God, I'm in the arms of my boss and I'm the head of HR. Like, this is a really bad look.
Yeah.
Everybody assumed I was horrified because it meant somehow I got busted having an affair. Like, that is not what was happening. I felt like those two reasons were big enough for me in that moment to be really horrified.
Did you even...
Okay, that one I could believe slightly more. Like, to say that it's not necessarily because she was cheating, but because she was with her boss, and you know, you're not supposed to be with your boss, that I would believe, because that would still be an instant, like, survival instinct, self-preservation reaction, because it's still taboo, it's still wrong whether or not it's an affair. You're not supposed to be with your boss. So that one I could believe a little bit more, but it's like this excuse making of like, oh, everybody just thought it's because I was having an affair and that's just not what's going on. Well, no, that's a little bit what's going on, because even if it's in a gray area, it's still a gray area, right? It's not that you're both in the clear. Clearly something was going on here. He still clearly had some kind of connection to his wife. And that sentence that she says at the end is interesting. She goes, I felt like those two excuses are enough for me to have been horrified by this. And it kind of sounds like what she's saying there is, I feel like those two excuses that I made up after the fact are enough to get you guys off my back because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Like, that wording is so interesting. Instead of saying, no, those are the two things that were on my mind, she's going, I felt like those two are enough for me to be horrified, right? They're enough. Like, you guys should buy that.
I whipped around, like Oprah, if we were at a Celtics game and we got put on the Jumbotron, I'm going to whip around. I'm not a Jumbotron girl, even on my best days. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
So I would have probably done some version of that.
So she's not a Jumbotron girl, but she is an Oprah Winfrey girl. Look, I get it. It's not a perfect comparison because they both have a different purpose. But if you're trying to make the point that you don't like public attention, the story had pretty much blown over. You know, like, we had forgotten. We were moving on. And she came out into this Oprah Winfrey interview and gets millions of views. So it's going to be hard to convince me that she absolutely at all costs avoids public attention. Also, the point that she's trying to make here is that under normal circumstances, any circumstances, she would have behaved more or less that way. So are we expected to believe that if she was at this concert with a bunch of girlfriends and the camera cut to them, that she would have like shoved them away and turned her back and hid and not turned back towards the camera? I really, really doubt that. Look, something happened in that moment where Chris Martin and the rest of the world in an instant knew that something was wrong. It wasn't just a woman turning away from the camera, it was a lot more than that. And it seems like the only one who didn't see how obvious it was is Kristin herself.
I appreciated that the board was behind me, and I appreciated, they did go through an HR investigation and it yielded nothing. And I appreciated that, at least internally there, I got that support.
Yeah.
But
Okay, I have to be honest, that line has been tormenting me. Seriously, I sent that clip to friends of mine saying like, so explain this to me. What is she saying here? There was an internal investigation with HR and it turned up nothing. An investigation about what? Like, seriously, about like take a second to think about this. What was this internal investigation about? Either this investigation was about, are they having some kind of intimate affair? In which case the answer is yes. Billions of people saw it. So how did it turn up nothing? We saw the thing. There's proof. And if it's not that, then what is the internal investigation about? Were they looking into whether these two were planning a heist together? I don't get it. What is this internal investigation that turned up nothing? And if it yielded nothing, why did they both resign a couple of days later? Like, she's saying it was great that she had this internal support, but she left the job. So did Andy. And although the official story is that they quit, the board released a statement saying that, at least in Andy's case, he didn't respect the standards of conduct and accountability. So I don't get what she's talking about here with this internal investigation that yielded nothing.
local radio station gave out my address on the air. And for whatever reason, the whole world has access to my phone number. And I guess that I don't know how people do that. But so from that day I returned, there was paparazzi there for weeks. They wouldn't leave. I had people trespassing and looking in my windows. We had people doing drive-bys and yelling and honking. We had my phone.
With your children home.
Yes, with my children home. My phone was ringing around the clock and just vile text messages and voicemails.
Okay, I wanted to include that clip here because I often talk about objectivity. It's one of the most important things for me with my work. And I think that this analysis, more than a lot of other analyses, seems one-sided, like I'm coming into this with a bias. But I want to make something very clear. Bias is something that happens before the analysis. So if I came into this with already some kind of preconceived notion about this woman and I let that affect the analysis, that's bias. But this, I don't believe, is bias. It is a little bit more certain than other analyses that I've had, but it's not as a result of coming in with a bias. I didn't come into this thinking that, okay, I'm going to find how this woman's story doesn't make sense. I came into this with an open mind, having no idea what I'm going to look at, but in the way that she told the story, in the way that she's twisting certain things around, or the way certain things don't really match up or make sense, the body language doesn't match the story that she's telling, given my experience, as a result of the analysis, I have way too many questions about what's going on here. But I want to draw a very clear and hard line that even given our curiosity, given our skepticism at times, we must remain humane. And the things that she's talking about here that happened to her as a result of this is completely unacceptable. They both messed up. That's a fact. And it was broadcast on a scale that is massively huge, unimaginably huge. But for people to stalk her at her house and for the news to give out her address, that's just crazy. Come on, like that's just insane. And I get it. It's kind of ironic because I'm analyzing footage of her, but this is an interview that she chose to do. I'm not camped outside her house analyzing footage of her through the windows. That's not what's going on here. And that's just insane that people would do that. But it's unbelievable how we're in a world where you make a mistake and it just becomes literally the whole world's business. And it's kind of crazy. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve any, repercussions to this. Obviously, they messed up. I still think to a degree she's messing up because a lot of what she's answering here is, I think, far from honest. But it doesn't mean that they deserve to have their lives stalked like this, especially when they have children, when they have families. And also, she went on to say that he has job opportunities lined up and he's doing okay and he's staying away from the public eye, whereas she's getting a lot of this backlash. I don't know to what extent that's true. There's two sides to every story, but that wouldn't be fair either. Whatever repercussion they're getting, they should both be getting. But anyways, a lot of what she's saying here, I'm absolutely not for in any way.
You still talk to Andy Byron, your former boss?
No, I ended communication with Andy in mid-fall. There was a big miss on honesty and integrity. He wasn't the person he represented himself to be to me, and lying is not a non-negotiable for me.
What does that mean, actually?
It means he missed the mark on being as honest as he could have been with me. And at the end of the day, Oprah, I was the one left
Meaning
holding.
he wasn't separated? Because what you're implying to me, what I'm hearing is that he really wasn't separated. Is that what you're trying to say?
I want to be really careful because the world spoke for me and on my behalf, and I don't want to do that to somebody else in their family. I don't feel comfortable. But I will say, a lot of what was represented to me was not true.
Okay.
I also want to say that being left...
But will you verify again, as you said to us earlier, that he had told you, when you told him you were separated, he had said to you he's going through the same
unequivocally.
thing? Okay.
Unequivocally.
So you believed when you were standing with him at the Coldplay concert that he was separated?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Zero doubt.
Okay, we are seeing a lot of verbal gymnastics here where she's really, really trying to not say something while making it sound like she's saying something. So she starts by saying he wasn't the person he represented himself to be. So you would think if it was a very clear meaning to that, like he said he was divorced or he said he was separating when he was not. That's what she would say, but she doesn't. She said, very ambiguous. He wasn't the person he represented himself to be. Now, Oprah does what an interrogator there would do. Quite literally, she goes, what does that mean actually? What does that mean? Describing what those words mean exactly. In response to this, Kristin has something we call speech disfluency. This is when someone who is otherwise pretty coherent, like Kristin, their words start to fall apart. And she says, and this usually happens when the cognitive load is increased. We're thinking about a lot. And in this case, she's thinking about how to navigate this question. After the disfluency, she basically rephrases the exact same thing. She just repackages the exact same answer. She says, he missed the mark on being as honest with me as he can be, which is literally what she had just said. So she doesn't clarify anything. So then Oprah fills in that blank and says, so what I'm hearing is that he wasn't really separated in the way that he told you that he was. And she responds, there's been a lot of people out there who made stuff up about me, so I don't want to do the same about this situation. But that's not a direct equivalence because people out there making stories up about her don't know her, weren't involved. In this case, she was involved. And he told her something. So if it was flat out that he's separated, she would be able to say, yeah, he told me that he was separated, which at the end, she very clearly confirms. But there's something else around this that isn't as clear cut as it seems, because she's navigating this question in such a bizarre way. And then at the end, we get the cherry on top of the sundae when she, for a third time, says that what he represented to her wasn't true. And again, if it's that clear, why not just say exactly what it is that he represented that was not true? But she doesn't really do that. She just kind of keeps it ambiguous. And again, any trained interrogator here, immediately a bunch of red signals would go off where something here isn't as clear or as black or white as he said this when this was the truth. There's too much ambiguity to this language. And by the way, this might have something to do with the fact that there have been current reports, I haven't validated each one of them, but there are several news reports that have said that he's still with his wife, Andy is still with his wife, and he has been seen with his wedding ring still on. So maybe what's happening here is that Kristin doesn't really want to say something that's going to come back and bite her in the ass. I'm not really sure, but it's too ambiguous. Something here isn't sitting right.
I heard you were upset when there was a commercial that Gwyneth did. Gwyneth Paltrow, yeah.
Yeah, that was really disappointing to me. I felt like Gwyneth, someone whose company is founded on or framed around uplifting women and women's well-being, and she doesn't need the money. I don't know why she felt she needed to throw gas on the fire and get involved in all of this. It just felt really hypocritical to me and unnecessary. And I think, I don't want to let Ryan Reynolds off the hook either. He produced the ad, he created it.
Okay, shots fired to Gwyneth Paltrow and Ryan Reynolds. And it's interesting because I saw that ad and I didn't feel like it was directed or mocking Kristin and Andy at all. It was basically Gwyneth talking to the camera and saying that she was going to answer the most common questions that astronomer has been getting lately. And then you would see a question start being typed, which was about the Coldplay incident, and then it would cut back to Gwyneth instantly and she would answer a completely different question about what astronomer actually does.
Yes, astronomer is the best place to run Apache Airflow.
So it was like this funny little comedy thing about how, this is why people know what astronomer is, but here's what we actually do. So it wasn't really directed or condescending to Kristin in any way. But what I found interesting is that she says Gwyneth is a company that's known for uplifting women. And it was odd for her to make this decision, to make this commercial that comes at Kristin's expense. But this is such a one-sided way to look at it, because if you step back and look at the whole situation, then there's a woman who was cheated on with kids at home. At least that's the narrative that was out there and very much aligns with what's still being told today. So Gwyneth is looking at this going, I don't need to uplift this specific woman because she's the one who caused the turmoil and hurt another woman. So it wouldn't really make sense for Gwyneth to want to uplift this woman who, in this story, plays the role of a homewrecker who was with her boss when she wasn't supposed to be. So, it's kind of a weird position to take for her to be like, yeah, we have to uplift all women, even if perceivably you did this really awful thing, which kind of reduces the amount of accountability she's taking and saying, yeah, look, really shouldn't have done that, should have made it very clear with Andy what his situation was. If things got physical and romantic, we should have talked about it with the board and done everything right. Whereas here we're just getting all these, well, no, it wasn't really like this, it was more like this. But then the this doesn't make that much sense. And I guess that's a really good place to leave this off because it kind of sums everything up really well. I think that she's doing this interview in part because there's still a lot of backlash and people showing up their house and things like this. And she just kind of wants to create awareness on that. So that might subside a little bit. And maybe it will. I don't really know if these things are effective in that sense. But I think if she had taken a different approach to this interview, to just come completely clean and say, yeah, look, we really messed up. There was a relationship there. We hadn't really defined it yet. So we weren't in a place where we had told anyone. And, we got caught away in a moment and it happened to be on the big screen. And that was really, really embarrassing. And I apologize to his family. If it was more along those lines, as opposed to, oh, no. The reason I was embarrassed wasn't because we're having an affair. It's because I was thinking of my ex-husband and I didn't want to embarrass him in front of his family. So it's all these things that it's very, very hard to believe given what we all saw with our two eyes. Before I go, I have a quick announcement that's along the lines of what I've been talking about in the posts right here on YouTube, which, by the way, if you ever want updates, you haven't seen a video from me for a while, just go on my channel, go to posts, and I very often update what's going on with my schedule. And lately it has been completely hectic. So as a lot of you know, in October of 2024, I became a father, which is the greatest thing I've ever done. I'm loving every second of it. But 2 weeks ago, my son started daycare and it's a whole experience. But as a lot of parents know, it's also a germ factory. And pretty much day 2, he came back with a virus that the whole household got. And then from that, I was getting a little better. I was going to start working on a video. I caught an infection. I don't know if he brought it or it's just my virus evolved. And then as I was getting better from that, I was thinking about filming. I got another virus. And it's kind of this endless loop where as we're getting better, he brings something else home. So we've been dealing with that for a while. And it seems like it's going to go on for a little bit. I don't know where the end of that tunnel is. And on top of that, I have a very busy upcoming live touring schedule because I'm a live performer. I go perform for corporate events, I go perform in theaters, and I'm a speaker. I go do trainings and seminars for a lot of events and conferences and things like that, and I've got a lot of big ones coming up. So because of that, I don't know what my schedule is going to be like and my upload capacity is going to be like. And while I'm eternally thankful for your patience, and anytime I've had a stretch where I couldn't upload, I came back and the enthusiasm was 100% and the engagement was incredible, and we just brought the numbers right back up, and I will forever be thankful for that. I have a message specifically for my members, and even more specifically for the tier of members called Behavioral Apprentice. This is the members who pay to get videos a day in advance from everyone else. So I upload just for them, they get to see it a day in advance, and then I do the public release a day after that. And the truth of the matter is, I just can't keep that promise to you anymore, and I can't go on with a clear conscience knowing that I can't deliver that. I know you've been very patient. A lot of you have said it doesn't matter, we're here to support the channel. I just can't take money on something that I can't deliver consistently anymore. So the way I've handled it so far is that any month where I don't really deliver that, I just take all the membership fees of all the tiers and donate it entirely to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. But we're at a point now where the last 6 months I've donated to St. Jude's. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to eliminate that top tier very soon in the coming weeks. I'm going to get rid of it. And all members will be the behavioral artist tier, which means you still get that little logo, that little magnifying glass next to your name when you comment, and your comment's going to a different section for me, and you get priority responses. And as you know, I'm already very active in the comments, but I always take a bit of extra time in my week, regardless of how I'm feeling, to look at specifically the member comments and respond to those. So that will continue to happen. And if ever I can, if ever I'm having a slower week, I'll just post the video earlier for all the members. I won't advertise that. I won't put that in the membership description, but when I can, every now and then, I'll just do it if the schedule allows. But I'm going to be shutting down that higher tier because I can't consistently deliver those early uploads anymore due to schedule, due to life. But I will try to keep regularly uploading as much as I can. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for your continued encouragement. Every time I post saying, guys, I can't upload, the support is just so heartwarming, and I will forever be grateful for that. Let me know what you thought of this analysis in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.